to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. My name is Tracy Shirk, and we are chatting today about talent pathways and specifically what that looks like to create a talent pathway inside of your organization. And I have Nchopia Nwokoma with me today, and she is the Principal Assessment and Succession Consultant at Korn Ferry. So our conversation today is really going to draw on knowledge and experiences that allow us to really paint a picture for you as to what are internal talent pathways, how do we lay those out, and really utilize some of the important resources that we have to ensure that we're moving people forward in the way that they want to be and that really serve what the organization needs, using a couple different assessment tools and some different insights to do that. So, Nchopia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy.
Yeah. So I'm curious, tell me a little bit about internal pathway planning and succession planning. Why is it so important and why do we get it wrong so often?
Yeah. Internal pathway planning and succession planning is really important because it helps you understand or it helps you enable living your org strategy. So ideally, organizations have this reason that they exist. They have this work that's laid out ahead of them that they're trying to accomplish. And with a solid strategy or plan in place, you can ensure that you're executing on that strategy pretty close to 100% of the time, if not above 90%. So when we're talking about internal pathway planning or succession planning, what we're saying is really having a plan for the talent that you need to fulfill your organizational goals, knowing the talent you have in your pipeline, what they need to do to continue to grow and develop, when they're going to be ready to take on new roles and responsibilities, and then also understanding who you may need to bring in due to gaps in skills or lack of having talent internally, and then really understanding what the future looks like for you in the next 3 to 5 years or your organization in particular.
Yeah. So understanding what the future looks like, I think that it's double-sided, right? It's what does the future look like for the organization, which sometimes we don't even know what that looks like. You know, is there another pandemic? Is there a recession? What are all those things, right? So unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't have a crystal ball. And what that does is that creates significant opportunities. And I think the other side of that is, how do we allow our staff to know that there is actual opportunities for growth? So I'm curious, how do you map that out? And, when you're talking with clients, what are those deliverables you put in place so anyone in the organization can go, I want to go here. Here's how I get there.
Yeah. So, like you said, it is double-sided or it's twofold. So first, it's mapping out, again, what is the organization trying to accomplish this year? What is the organization trying to accomplish next year? What roles do you currently have? Who do you have in place? Who's doing what? What might need to be done in the future? And then creating those paths from looking at what you have today. And then there's that piece about communicating it out to employees. So once you have it defined, once you have the different job families defined, right, based on the needs of the business, it's then creating maps or clear communications to employees to understand what their role is, how it's classified, and what growth looks like for them or for the individual. So I've seen clients too, in the absence of being able to create true pathways for individuals, where you'll have employees who will say, oh, there are no growth opportunities here. And the organization is saying, why do people say that? We absolutely have growth opportunities. And then they find out that they haven't clearly communicated them, or they haven't defined them, or they're not desirable to the employee, right? Traditionally, you'll see like you have your admin assistant, there's admin assistant 1, there's admin assistant 2, there's admin assistant 3. Whereas people are saying, yeah, I'm an admin assistant, but maybe I'm interested in marketing. Help me figure out what I need to do to go from admin assistant 1 over to marketing. So it's really just clarifying what the roles are in the organizations, what the requirements are, right? Making that clear. It's a long step towards creating those internal pathways and making it easily accessible and visible so that anybody can go quickly read up and understand what the various roles are, what the responsibilities are, who may be qualified to do it. So then they can start looking at themselves to say, what do I need to do to be able to become who I want to become in this organization? And then if you are a larger organization with those different steps in your different career paths, it's now looking at the roles and figuring out what qualifies someone as a senior version of XYZ role. What is entry level of XYZ role? How does that relate to the pay bands? What are the job families? What's the architecture? What's the structure? And what do we need to do to really make sure we're attracting and retaining people based on what we're seeing in the market?
That is amazing. And there's so much loaded into there that I want to unpack it a little bit. And so we have, within our listeners, and I always kind of hear them on my shoulder talking and saying, okay, but we're really tiny, Tracy and Nchopia. We've got 50 employees or 25 employees. So what is a job family? And then how do we align that, especially when we're teeny tiny?
Mm-hmm. So job families are job groupings that exist together. You kind of think of them as things that are related. So different functions, in a business, you can have HR, you can have marketing, you can have finance, you can have secretarial or administrative functions, you can have more technical functions. So it's looking at the roles, looking at the technical skill set, the capabilities, and finding those groupings. There are a number of ways to do this. And ONET the US government has this perfectly great tool called ONET that maps out those things for you a little bit.
And it's amazing. And we will link it in the show notes. Keep going.
Oh, yes. So you can use ONET to start off there. If you're a small organization, you can start off there. I say no organization is too small for that, because even if you're a smaller organization and you're pretty flat, people will still want to know what's in it for me if I continue to work here. And you can share that. You can have them buy into that by just sharing the vision of the organization. If you're a small organization and your goal is to grow larger, it's saying, hey, we want to grow larger one day. So yeah, you may be doing this role today, but 5 years from now, that could look like managing people. Or 5 years from now, this role might look like a little bit different. And you can pull data from what's already out there, starting with ONET, to really understand what the future of roles look like and what those families might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for describing that and talking about small businesses and large businesses, because there's so much that goes into that. And one thing I wanted to name too that you talked about is you've got the pathway, and there's times where, I'm not desiring that pathway, but there's also, I think, the distinction between pathways of a pathway does not mean it's only into a leadership position where you're managing people, because some of us are not meant to manage people, right?
Yeah.
So how do we create pathways where there's like a specialist pathway, but also a leadership pathway that there's the end both?
I love seeing that these days. Traditionally, what people thought about expanded responsibility, growth in your career always ended up with having to manage people. So what you would have is these leaders who didn't really enjoy leading people or who weren't inspired to be people managers, but because of the expanded responsibilities or the increased pay associated with that work, they would take on these responsibilities. Nowadays, we're saying, look at it twofold. Being a leader of people, managing people is a skill set on its own, and it can be its own path, right? As a leader of people, as a manager of people, as someone who wants to climb the corporate ladder, you're moving away from doing more so towards motivating and inspiring people and empowering people to do their work and holding people accountable in different ways than a person who might be a specialist who has strong technical capabilities, knows the in and outs of their job, but may not be interested in ever having to coach, mentor, or develop others. So what you traditionally see is people, let's say in an engineering function, you'd have a strong technical engineer who loves his work, knows it ins and outs, but wants to be promoted, wants to make more money. And they would say, all right, you now have to go be a leader of people. And this individual would move further away from engineering, more into work that they don't necessarily find fulfilling, but is more lucrative. And then you'd see them a little frustrated with their job, experiencing some burnout, having people that work underneath them that are not as happy with their work because you have a leader that you consider a bad boss. Nowadays, what companies are doing is creating two different paths. They're saying, hey, this is the path for people management. If you want to lead people, after you do this for X amount of time, here's the skills that you need to acquire or the things you need to display to indicate that you're a strong people leader or you have the potential to really function well as a leader of people. You're seeing some of the soft skills come into play with that path. People who communicate effectively, can relate to people really nicely, people who have some empathy, people, you're seeing humility come out a little bit there because they're focused on helping others perform work at their best rather than needing to be the best. Mm-hmm. With the specialists, you see these people who are passionate about their work. They love exactly what they do, and they're focused more on growing in their depth of knowledge about the work that they do. So how you can tease out the two is when you're talking to people in your workplace or you're talking to those you lead, is just asking them, where do they see themselves as it relates to their role if money weren't an option? If you hear them saying things like, I want to grow my skill set in this area, I want to write papers, I want to go to conferences, I want to be known for this topic, then that indicates specialty functions. If you see people who say, I'm really inspired by developing talent, I'm really interested in helping people grow their careers, I want to teach people how to do this work, that is a little indicator of perhaps this person is more called to the leadership role. And that's not a clear, clean-cut way to really figure it out, but it's a way to start teasing it out.
Awesome. I love those definitions. And thank you so much for that, because so often we get in the weeds as to what that is, and it's not a clear, okay, so now that we have that, kind of how do we do that? Now I'm going to shift to my small organization folks that are chatting in my ear right now and essentially saying, hey, you know what? We're at 15 people, we're at 20 people, we're at 40 people, and we're not going to add head count. However, we still need to have a talent development plan. We still need to have a succession plan. So how do we create in-position growth? Mm-hmm. So the individuals can still grow in their position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually, small organizations, you can have a lot of fun with what's ahead of you while creating in-position growth. One of the things you can do is ask people, as you're looking to grow the organization, you have these people who've been with you and who have knowledge of your organization and the business. And you can ask them, what does growth look like for you in your role? What would you want to do? And allow them to really own and define their career path. And I guess this is solid advice, regardless of large organization or small organization. You want people to own and define their career path rather than tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, we see you being able to do this. You want them to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in, and then partner with them to make that happen. What you see in a small organization as you're partnering with people in your workplace to create their path is you'll see them get really engaged and go above and beyond their regular 9-to-5 work to create their own opportunities, which in turn helps your business grow. And before you know it, that person may have created their whole new job and allowed you to now bring in more headcount, right? And you can work with them to create a plan where that happens over time. As long as you're setting expectations as you're doing this, we don't see this happening tomorrow or in the next month. But, as long as you keep at it, here's what might be in store for you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I absolutely love that. So when we look at what's in store for them, I think something that so often happens with succession planning is, behind the closed doors, we have these conversations about, hey, guess what? We're going to promote Nchopia, and here's where she's going to go, and here's all those things she has, but we never tell you about it. Yeah. So then, all of a sudden I get your 2 weeks notice. I'm like, well, why are you leaving? You're like, well, I don't see growth here. And I'm like, well, actually, here's our plan for you, and here's where you're going to go. And this is what you wanted, right? And you're like, yeah, but you never told me that.
They should. You want your employees to be co-creators in their destiny with the organization. So even with success, even with co-creators, people need to own.
I have to interrupt you to be like, wait a second, that's amazing. All right, so how do we have our employees be co-creators in their destiny?
It goes back to what you hear with leaders really building those strong relationships with their employees to where they're able to have those candid conversations to where employees are able to say, this is what I like about my job. This is what I want to do when I grow up in the organization. And then the leader serves as an advocate for them. When you go behind those closed doors and you're looking at the succession plan and you're doing things like a 9-box and you're saying who needs to be where, what strengths are they showing, what are their opportunities, you should have a conversation with your employee prior to that. So where you're not going in blindly and having to guess, and that you should also be representing them. The strengths that you've identified with them and their opportunities should be something that they absolutely are aware that you're aware of and that you both have alignment on. And then when you're in the exercise focused on succession planning, it's you sharing what you've discussed with the employee and using that to help map out the path in the organization based on that discussion.
Absolutely. And Nchopia, you have a 9-box that we can link in the show notes. So
yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So we will have that 9-box linked in the show notes with your information as well, because we don't have enough time to dig into that today, but that is an amazing tool to really look at, hey, how do we promote individuals within and really work towards that? So as our podcasts are short and sweet, right? I'm curious, what is kind of this actionable takeaway for our executives that are listening into this conversation today to take back to their team and really implement when they're thinking about maybe it's their own succession planning or maybe it's succession planning of some leaders on their team?
Yeah, key takeaways. No organization is too small or too big to have succession plans. You'd be surprised about the large organizations out there who don't have succession plans. And then even the smaller organizations who don't feel like they can or should. And I say, even if it's just you and your business, have a plan in place. You've worked hard for your business. You want to see it grow, or you want to see the business achieve its objectives. And a succession plan is your strategy to do that. And then the other piece is step 1 of succession planning is having the conversations with your employees to understand what their interests are. Really understand what employees' interests are, where they see themselves in the future. You might see in today's world some hesitation still with people opening up because we're in this transition point where people are still remembering the workplace of their parents, where the organizations tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, you're going to be a manager, and didn't really care what you said. So some people play their cards close to their chest and they don't feel comfortable saying what they truly want to do. But really work with your people to open up, to share where they see themselves, even if it's not in the work that they're doing today. What do they enjoy doing? And then help them find themselves in the organization based on their interests and help them create a path to connect there. And when you do that, you'll see that engagement, you'll see the organizational commitment, you'll see them really being able to view themselves as partners too in your organization's existence, increasing the likelihood of them staying with you long term.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And what about for HR professionals that are listening in today?
Yeah, for HR professionals, it can be a daunting exercise, but I will say that leaders often find it enjoyable. So if you're looking for step 1 for you to do today, it's start viewing the 9-box that'll be linked and just using that to map out who you know in your organization, if you're a smaller organization, and where they sit in the 9-box. And then from there, use that to have conversations with your managers or the people that you partner with to find out about the talent in the organization and what they know about that talent. And then encourage them to go have conversations with their people about where those individuals see their careers, how they want to grow their careers, how they're performing, and then use that to get into a regular cadence about having these quarterly or if not annual succession planning meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today and the definitions that you provided for, what does talent pathway planning look like? How does that link to succession planning are definitely gold. So thank you so much. And Nchopia's information will be linked into the show notes along with the 9-box. Thank you so much for listening in today. And be sure to check out our Talent Optimization Foundation. So this gives you the opportunity that if you have any of those questions that you want to check in with an HR professional and you don't have that already built in, we do have that membership program available for you as well. So we hope that you have a fantastic day and we will chat with you next week.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.